Hi, for those of you that don't know me, my name's Joan Jack. This may be the first video that you're watching of me. This is part 7 in a from the heart rendition or speech or diatribe or whatever you want to call it. I felt that I wanted to share because I was so frustrated about there's such a disconnect between our leadership and our staff and our people in Indian country that it doesn't feel like democracy at all to me. So I've been going through various things that I know and feel like sharing, and people have been talking to me. Tonight's topic is a really, really hard one. I wanted to talk first of all about we have a problem all over Canada and Indian country with people who are married in. And so the problem or the challenge that we have, I'm just going to sort of talk about it, and I have no idea what I'm going to say. I know, what I've experienced, but I don't know how that's going to manifest tonight. Although I have a really full and robust understanding of our own traditional laws, Indigenous people, I've been focusing on the Indian Act because the Indian Act is what controls the day-to-day lives of most Indigenous people. I mean, there are a lot of our people who've gone through a decolonization process, understand about sovereignty, and there are a few people who've been raised up in the community in a sovereign understanding. But most people are in the, there may be 10%, 15, I'm making this up, 10, 15, 20% of people that have gone through a conscious decolonization process where they reclaim their ingenuity, I think they call it these days. There's like a word for it, where you reclaim, you decolonize, you heal, you reconcile inside yourself. That process, maybe there's 20%, I don't know. And then on this end over here, maybe there's 5% of people who've really been raised in a traditional paradigm, in a traditional worldview of their own people. The rest of us are all somewhere in the middle. If you go to any reserve in Canada and ask the average person you see at the store or anywhere, why are things the way they are, people don't know. People don't know the source of our legalized oppression. And so I have been doing a series of sharing on my views about that. So the married in thing. Under the Canadian law, there's this idea that you have to always pick this or that. Pick this or that, right or wrong. And I believe that comes from European thinking. Pick this or that, right or wrong. There can only be one right answer. There can only be one person at the top. It's very thinking that's linear, thinking that's adversarial, thinking that causes polarities, and it's not thinking that promotes some of the things that come from our Indigenous worldviews, which is, for example, interdependence. Rather than saying the sun is against the moon, the sun depends on the moon. Rather than saying men are against women or women are against men, you can't have one without the other. There's this idea of interdependence. Thanks, honey. Thank you. So, he picked the orange ginger. He asked me what kind of tea I want. I said, you pick. So he made me orange ginger tea. Under the Indian Act, you can only belong to one First Nation. You can only be registered as an Indian under one Indian band. You can't have like dual citizenship. So for example, if you want to be a citizen of Canada and you want to be a citizen of the United States, or maybe you're entitled to be, you can apply for dual citizenship. So that idea of dual citizenship, there are people who have dual citizenship all over the world. That idea doesn't apply to us because the Canadian state never did see us as nations, independent. And so the Indian Act was really formulated to just basically herd us and manage the Indian problem and count the numbers and keep the numbers as small as possible. So in that kind of a system, there's no need for dual citizenship. So that's a big problem, because earlier today after supper we were talking about our visitors from France were saying that one of the things that happens when you meet someone is you ask people, what do you do for a living? Like, what's your job? Like one of the first questions. And I smiled and I said, well, with us Indigenous people, the first question you ask someone is, where are you from? And you don't ask people what you do, like in terms of being productive, until maybe the third or fourth question. The next question is kind of, usually, how many kids do you have? Or how many grandkids do you have? And so it's about relationship, place and relationship. So when you're married in, you have to decide if you're going to live, if you're even allowed. There are some Indian reserves in Canada that don't allow people who are not registered to that nation to stay on those reserve lands after they've ended the relationship. I'm not saying how I feel about that either way, one way or the other. But I'm just saying it is all about where you are registered. So I married Brian. He's registered here at 501. I was teaching you last night about, and many of you know all this already, but I was teaching about, the first three numbers of our registered Indian card are the Indian band. So 501 is Tack River Tlingit, 266 is Barnesville First Nation. So when I got registered, I was initially registered to 266, and then you can apply to transfer your registered Indian status over to your Indian band, with your spouse. So I did that. I transferred from 266 into 501 and was a 501 band member here for quite a long time. The trouble with that process is that usually when you transfer into the nation, you have the basic democratic right of at least being able to vote. So the case law has evolved now, people fighting and fighting, like you used to be that you had to be living on the reserve to vote, and there's all these other rules. And now if you transfer your membership, wherever you're registered as an Indian is usually where you can vote. Now this is the hard part for me, because I don't want to offend any Tlingit people. So I transferred in here, and it's a paperwork process, and it's not an arduous process. You just fill out papers and stuff, and then it's approved by the leadership, and then you're an Indian Act band member. So another thing Bill C-31 did was, the other thing that happened was the federal government said, we're going to give First Nations back control of their membership. And that sounded really good. Like that sounds really good. Yeah. Except the truth is, the ability to register people with your band is still controlled by the Indian Act and the Indian Act regulations. So while a nation may say, like I was talking about this elder last night that said, 1 drop of blood, that's all you need. If you can trace your roots here, then okay, we'll take you. You belong here. We might be able to do that now, and we can do that now in developing our own membership codes since 1985. But what Indian Affairs says is, you can take anybody you want as a member then, but we're not going to give you money for them. So if you want to add, the Pope as your band member, you can. But if the Pope can't prove the lineage according to the registration system, like I said, in the Indian Act, and then Section 6 is the membership section, and then 6.1, 6.2, 6.2, all the way down to, like, I think there's 13 or 14 kinds of registered Indians. If you can't fit in those numbers somewhere, then we don't count you in our per capita, which is one person per person, funding formulas. So of course, it hasn't gone well. There isn't any funding for people unless they fit into the Indian Act registration process. So then why would any First Nations be encouraged to create membership that is based on who you are and your bloodlines and your relationship with the community if they can't provide any services to them? So it really didn't go well. In this community, the membership code was created in 1985 and has not been amended since. And in my case, I transferred my 266 over to 501 because I was married in here. But ultimately, I was denied the vote. Time after time, election after election, I was told I couldn't vote here. And my name did not appear on the voters list. So finally, I just said to Brian, the hell with it, I don't care anymore. I don't care if I ever vote here, And I transferred back home. I transferred my democratic right to vote back home. So that's all pretty grim and pretty negative and pretty complicated. So that's all I'm going to say about that. What I want to talk about now is the way I'm dressed tonight, which is the wonderful thing about the Tack River Tlingit. So before Susanna Carlick passed, she left a letter saying in the Tlingit culture, there's the funeral potlatch, and then 1 year or any time thereafter, there's a finishing potlatch. And at the finishing potlatches is where business gets done. Names are given, business gets done. So Auntie Sue said, at my finishing, I want you, my kid, she was writing to her children, to adopt Joan. I want her for my daughter. And so she wrote that in a beautiful letter. And then her children honored their mother's wishes and adopted me, well, my mom, me, and my children, because it follows the mother here. We were all taken into that family. So these buttons I'm wearing tonight are from Tlingit culture and the shells. And, we could talk so much more about that. And I now have place in the Tlingit community as far as traditional law goes, in that I have sisters and brothers, and at potlatch I have a place to sit. I belong. I sew, I dance, I do my best to respect their culture and lift up my husband, and be the best wife and mother that I can in their way. But I would be lying to say that not having been respected in terms of my democratic human rights, I would be lying if I said that hasn't wounded me deeply. And that too is a part of the process of decolonization, where we have the two legal systems operating in the same space, in the same homes, in the same hearts. And until that's reconciled, it's just going to continue to cause pain. So for me, I said to my husband, it's way more important to me to vote than anything else. So I will stay your wife. I will dance with you. I will sew for you. I will cut up your moose. I will cook fish. I will do all the things that I need to do as a Tlingit woman to be a good wife to you and mother to my children. But I will vote at home. So I vote in the election, in the Indian Act election in Barons. And I know I'm not the only one. I know I'm not the only one that is going through this. And I think there are probably more women that are going through this than men, because it just seems to me anyway, what I noticed is that it's the women who move. There are some men who've moved, like in Barons, we have some men who've moved down into our community for whatever reasons, even historically. But it's mostly women who move and live in the lands of their husbands. So I wanted to just also say, I put on some Navajo jewelry tonight as well, and I did that deliberately. These pieces of Navajo jewelry are from obviously the Navajo, but they're signed by artists and stamped, and this one here was my first piece that I got, and the artist's name is in the inside of it. And Navajo jewelry is identified universally as a symbol of Indigenous culture. And on this side here, I have, my husband had this made for me. It's a gold inlaid raven, because in his people's clan system, he's a wolf and I have to be raven. Because in their clan system, in their original systems, you don't marry, generally, you try not to marry inside your own clan, because that's like your brothers and sisters. When I was adopted by a Cocaton, a Crow woman on that side, because my husband's on the opposite side. So belonging is really very important. I don't know if any of this made any sense to anyone. Some feedback would be really good. It takes courage to talk about these things, because we tend to blame ourselves for the situation, when really all of this chaos can be traced back to the legalized racism in this country that still exists. Yeah, if we were ever going to change anything, it would be through Section 35 and through having, pieces of legislation that simply affirmed what we say we want as Indigenous people. We're nowhere near that in this country. I just want to close by sharing one thing I realize. I've learned so much from the Tlingit people and not really having place here. The only way that I was able to process it is that if you think about, well, I have a tattoo here. If you think about the medicine wheel and you think about these lines here, these are the lines that if you have the blood, you can walk these lines to the middle. If you don't have the blood, there's nothing saying you can't make your own line, So just because I've been adopted doesn't mean I get to walk on this line. I still have to be careful, and I still have to be respectful that I don't have the blood to belong here. What really peeves me off about this whole membership thing is that in order to continue to abuse power, circles have to be closed. And that's a really big thing I just said, so I'm going to say it again. In order to be able to continue to abuse power, circles have to be closed. Secrets have to be kept. Doors have to be locked, So it's until we open up these things, even if it's difficult and controversial and sounds like blame and lateral violence and all these other fancy words people have nowadays for oppression, we have to talk about these things. And I know these conversations are going on all over the place. This is not the only place, but they're going on in my heart and they're going on in our home. And I just wanted to share them with you. So if you found anything of value in tonight, please share this because, hey, I'm going to be on CBC Radio on Wednesday morning, CBC Yukon. Tune in. All right, see you tomorrow night.